Hello, my name is Sharon Turnbull and I'm an Organisational Development Advisor with Capital Horizons. Um, I've written an article called The Soul of Organisations, and I guess the word soul is not a word that we might associate with leadership or with organisations, and indeed the idea of soul came from an amazing little book called The Soul of Leadership by Deepak Chopra. And this idea of the soul of leadership, and I'll say a little bit more about that later, inspired me to write and think about how we as leaders might understand the soul of our organisation. And indeed, once we've understood it, how we might work with it, how we might develop it, how we might share our understanding with others. So in this short video, I'd like to introduce some of those ideas and provoke you to think a little bit more about what the soul of your leadership could be, and also what the soul of your organisation might be. So what do we mean by soul? Well, I had a look at definitions of soul when I started to think about it, and I found that the Oxford English Dictionary said that soul is an emotional and intellectual energy. And I think that's really important for leaders to think about. We need a certain kind of energy to be injected into organisations, and then in turn our organisations take on a certain emotional and intellectual energy of their own. So I think that's a very nice definition to work with when we think about the soul of organisations. Merriam-Webster Dictionary says that soul is the essence, the animating principle or actuating cause, a moving spirit. And again, I think that too often we ignore and overlook what actually moves us as leaders, but also what actually moves our organisation in particular directions. And Deepak Chopra, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote The Soul of Leadership in 2010, talked about an underlying universal sense of consciousness. So I don't want to get metaphysical in this video, or indeed in my article, but more taking some of those ideas and thinking about how we might work with those. So Deepak Chopra starts with the idea that a leader is the symbolic soul of a group, and I think that's true. I think a leader does set some tone, some principle, some essence, some feelings around what an organisation can and should be. And this sense goes even beyond an organisation's purpose that I've spoken about in the article, The Essence of Leadership. He also imagines a world in which countless leaders can rise to the highest level of greatness. So I think he imagines organisations too that are full of people acting as leaders, sharing leadership, distributed leadership. I think it's about that essence, and I think that resonates with what Charles Handy says, and I'm going to read this quote. He says, "The greatest gift you can give anyone is to water a golden seed, help identify in someone what they're good at, plant that in them and cultivate their talents so the golden seed will grow and flourish and then go on to succeed." Now, we as leaders need to understand what is our golden seed, because that's the richness that we share with our organisations. But it's also very important for us to try to understand what is the golden seed of our organisation. So what is the unique contribution, but more than that, what is the thing that makes us different? What's the thing that really identifies us as something special, something different? And I think for Chopra to do that, we need to really tune in. We need to develop our sense of awareness. Chopra loves the word awareness. He talks about awareness being unlimited and the birthplace of possibility. And a bit like when I was talking and writing about leadership, I mentioned that one of the key essences of leadership, is reflection, to be able to develop our reflective capabilities. And I think with reflection comes awareness, comes a deeper understanding of both who we are, but also of what our organisation is. In the book, The Soul of Leadership, which I strongly recommend to you, Deepak Chopra uses the first letter of each of the letters in the word leadership to outline a different way that a leader can look at the idea of soul and work towards finding both their own individual soul, but also the soul of their organisation. So L being the first letter of leadership, Chopra talks about L being for look and listen. And he says we should, as leaders, look and listen with our senses, our mind, our heart and soul. And for him, that is about sensing and understanding our own unique contribution, the contribution that we can make both to our organisations and, of course, to the world as a whole. E of leadership, Chopra says, is about emotional bonding, which is, he says, different from emotional intelligence that we see written about extensively in the leadership literature, because he says actually emotional bonding is both emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. So that intelligence that he associates with love, compassion, joy, and an inner peace. So again, that might sound quite intangible if you're a busy practicing manager and leader, but it is about somehow sensing what brings us joy and what makes this organisation flourish, and the people within the organisation feel engaged, motivated, inspired, and involved. The A of leadership he talks about as being awareness, and for Chopra, awareness is about connecting, having a sense of our consciousness, and to do that he talks about connecting through intuition and creativity and inspiration and so on. And the D, which this I think will be familiar to you, is about doing. So he does say that of course leaders need to do. So although they need to be very reflective and aware, they also need to make decisions and prompt actions and be practical. And so as well as being aware and reflective and thinking, of course leaders need to make something happen. And Chopra is very aware of that. For Chopra, E in the leadership represents empowerment. So not holding on to centralised power, but devolving power, sharing power, and empowering the people within the organisation to act and to be part of the essence of the organisation. And finally, R for Chopra is about taking responsibility. And that responsibility for Deepak Chopra is responsibility for our own actions, responsibility for the actions of our organisation and ourselves within the organisation, and of course responsibility for our organisation with society and how we act in terms of the sustainability of our planet's resources, so responsibility for the planet ultimately. So that might sound quite theoretical, but I hope that it's prompted you to think a little bit about what it is that's your golden seed. What is the golden seed, to quote Handy, of your organisation? And what is the soul of your organisation? What makes it different? And if you are an entrepreneur or a founder of an organisation, these things are likely to be very much overlapping. If you have inherited an organisation, you might be thinking about how your golden seed and the soul of your organisation coincide or may not, and how you would bring those more closely together. How do you communicate the soul of your organisation? But first, how do you understand it? How do you know what it is? In the article, I refer to Johnson and Scholl's cultural web, which you may have come across. The cultural web comes from a book by Johnson and Scholes called Exploring Corporate Strategy. And in that book, they talk about the cultural web as a way of getting to understand the essence of an organisation's culture, which they call the paradigm. In their earlier texts, they used to call that paradigm a recipe. And I think in some ways that was quite a nice metaphor for understanding what is under the surface of an organisation. But today, in more recent editions, they call the essence of a culture the paradigm. So I think as a leader, trying to aim for an understanding of the soul of our organisations is something similar to understanding the paradigm of our organisation's culture. But in the article, I say that I think it's a little bit more. It's understanding something even deeper than the paradigm. So if you think about culture, there are visible aspects of culture. So there are symbols, there are controls, there are rituals and stories. So there are many ways to diagnose and understand and see elements of cultural behaviours. But these are only visual representations of what's under the surface. And so I think when we talk about the soul of an organisation, what we're trying to do is to understand more about the driving forces, the values, the beliefs, the sense of purpose, and how that is enacted by the leaders in an organisation. Otto Scharmer and his colleagues in his Theory U talk about that more in one of the other articles on learning, talks about the idea of presencing. And I really like that idea. Presencing is, he says, about connecting with the source of one's best future possibility, so looking forward, and then bringing this possibility into the present. And he also says that presencing requires leaders to find a deep connection with their authentic self, purpose, and work. And that's very much resonating with Chopra's idea of pursuing our own sense of consciousness and a deeper sense of soul, as he uses that word. In the article, I have shared a little bit of the story of how we identified and tried to work with the soul of Capital Horizons, which is a very young organisation, only founded in 2014, but with a group of advisors and staff, and actually some clients as well, of Capital Horizons. We did some work to try and understand what the soul of Capital Horizons is, with a view to A, understanding it, and B, building on it, and C, really understanding what binds the people within the organisation together, and what also is shared with the clients of the organisation. So in the article, we take you a little bit through some of the things that we did in order to understand what that soul is. And I think, indeed, understanding the soul of an organisation is better to do with members of the organisation, with people who work with and around the organisation, and indeed with clients or partners, because actually on our own as leaders it's very hard for us to really articulate that. So I see that as an exercise that can be done together, and in fact the very nature of doing that kind of work together and having that kind of discussion is something which can bring out and help to articulate what it is that the essence of the organisation, what we're referring to here as the soul of the organisation. And I think that's all I really want to say on that right now. We show in the article some of the aspects of the soul of Capital Horizons that are very deeply meaningful to us, and things that we value and that guide our behaviour and our beliefs. And perhaps just to summarise those, we use the letters of Capital Horizons, since Deepak Chopra uses the letters of leadership. C for connecting people and ideas and giving across the globe. A, affirming. So one of our participants in the work that we did talk about giving and receiving, and this being mutual and interactive. P for people. People matter. Very much a family feeling came out of the conversations that we had about Kaplor. L for learning and leadership, essential tenets of our organisation. O for opportunities for sharing and working and thinking together. R for responsible, and being responsible and hopefully a force for good. And then the horizons letters. H we had for heart, very important, the feeling element of our organisation, and how we balance the thinking and the feeling and the knowing. O for open and flexible, wanting to learn and embrace others and engage with others in as many ways as possible. R for results orientated, we're very keen to know what difference our work makes. I for involving, and we're very keen to involve many, many different kinds of people with different skills and different contributions, and connecting those contributions to our purpose. Z for zooming in and out. So zooming in and out would be where we work with organisations for a while and share learning and work with them and help where we can, but then zoom out so that those people within that organisation are self-supporting and can then go on to zoom in and out and support other people. O for one world, we do see ourselves as world citizens, and very much we're an organisation which extends our reach across the globe. N for nourishing, our golden seeds. I talked about that earlier, really trying to understand the unique contributions and golden seeds of everybody who participates in the work of Capital Horizons. And C is for sustaining, because sustainability is at the essence of our work, and everything we do is with a view to a sustainable future. So please read the article, please reflect on your golden seed, please reflect on the soul of your organisation, and maybe think about how you might put together a little workshop or a series of workshops with people in the organisation and people who sit just outside of the organisation or who are connected to the organisation, to have that conversation about what is the soul of your organisation and what's the soul of your leadership. Thank you.